answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Iran, as usual, keeps thinking they can get away with it, that America isn't watching. And this posturing for war, I think, is a major mistake on behalf of the Iranians. History shows it only ends badly for them. Between us and the Israelis, we have a lot of intelligence information on them. They like to hide their drone operations under this guise of exercises, but yet we're almost, flying ours in broad daylight. And I think that's the difference between a regime pretending to project strength and a real military that actually has it. What we're seeing right now, it's not just this routine military maneuvering, it's a chess match in the air. Iran's repositioning strike drones under the cover of these drills with Russia, and that tells me two things immediately. First, they still don't want transparency, and second, they're testing this battle positioning under plausible deniability. And by the way, let's not forget that this is exactly what Russia did before they went to war in Ukraine. They lied to the world, and they even, with their own soldiers saying they were conducting military drills, they went across the border and conducted operations.
Do you remember that? You remember Russia posturing itself around Ukraine, saying these are just military exercises. We have no intention of putting a foot on Ukrainian soil. They lied, but they kept the nation and the world waiting to see what was the next step. That is a former military exec on special ops, and he says we're seeing the same thing now with Iran. And while Russia is proclaiming both sides should exercise caution, Russia has been taking part once again in such a subterfuge. This live missile fire to the Hormuz Straits over the last few days that shut down the shipping because we didn't want any ships to be hit by mistake, cargo ships and so forth. Russia was involved with that, with Iran. And under the cover of that shutdown, they have been moving various drone facilities, ballistic missile operations closer into their coastline so they can strike faster into Israel and other countries as Iran chooses. Now, Russia's not going to be doing the shooting, but they're helping Iran provide a cover. In the meantime, sat photos show more building underway at one of the plants that we hit trying to knock out their nuclear capability last year. They are reopening tunnels. They're building new construction roads. They're putting in more equipment, all the time while sitting in front of U.S. representatives saying, what do we do to have peace and maintain peace? Because that's really what we want. They lie. And we're getting to a point now where it's not going to be acceptable. We cannot allow it to continue. This weekend could be the breaking point. I'm not telling you it will happen. I have no inside information. But what we're seeing begin to build up, everything points to this weekend. And earlier this week, President Trump had said 10 days. 10 days is the deadline. Now, that doesn't mean he would strike on the 10th or even the 11th or 12th. He might well strike on the 6th day. We got a lot to cover, and it's going to be a fast track. You better hold on. Here we go. Hour number one, Larry Connors USA. We're here every Monday through Friday for you from 6 to 8 p.m. And, yes, we charge out, as I've always said, a bull out of the gate. We're ready to tear into anything and everyone. And with Larry Connors USA, you're going to get news, analysis, opinion, and education. You're going to leave this hour with more information than you have right now, I promise you. And reminding you, when we're on the air, we are streaming video. Watch the program. NewsTalkSTL Rumble, Larry Connors USA Rumble, and, of course, Facebook and Twitter are available. And everything goes up as a podcast later in case you cannot stay with us the entire 2 hours. Look for the podcast. Any podcast outlet you want. We would like you to use NewsTalkSTL or LarryConnorsUSA.com. But that's your choice. And with LarryConnersUSA.com, you can subscribe, and we will dump the podcast in your email every day, so you don't have to go look for it. We need minimum information. We do not share, certainly don't even sell the information to anyone else. In our next hour, the Supreme Court has ruled on the Trump tariffs, saying he cannot do that. The ruling 6-3. 6-3. Which means some of the justices appointed as, quote, conservative went with the liberals. This should really reaffirm to the left and destroy their argument. The Supreme Court's simply going to rubber stamp everything Trump sends them. No, they've already seen evidence of that, and this is a clear set. Now, what happens next? And will Trump have to see our nation repay the tariffs, much less stop applying them? There's a thin line argument here over, are the tariffs the wrong thing? Was it done by the executive branch, not the House, as should be in charge of such any monetary issues? We're going to be joined by a member of the Heritage Foundation, which will give us a direct legal and fiscal responsibility issue points for us. That's in our next hour. Later in this hour, Iranian expert Fred Fleitz, 30-plus years with national intel operations, including the CIA. What about Iran? Fred Fleitz will fill us in. And our story behind the story. This week we lost Robert Duvall, the actor. Are you aware of the connections he had to St. Louis? Do you know why he did not want to participate in Godfather number 3? That's all part of the story behind the story, yet to come. Now back to the issue in front of us. President Trump reasserting the other day, Iran needs to recognize where we are.
Now is the time for Iran to join us on a path that will complete what we're doing. And if they join us, that'll be great. If they don't join us, that'll be great too. But it'll be a very different path. They cannot continue to threaten the stability of the entire region, and they must make a deal. Or if that doesn't happen, I maybe can understand. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But bad things will happen if it doesn't.
Yeah, bad things will happen. And we can begin to get an idea of that. Now, here's what you also need to keep in mind. There will be, obviously, a change in Iran when it's all done. It may come at a high price. It may come at a few swats at each other, and then the Ayatollah rushes off to Russia into hiding, and everything collapses. Senator Ted Cruz.
The Iranian regime has provided over 90% of the funding for Hamas and for Hezbollah. To see the mullahs toppled would be a tremendous advance for the people of Iran. It would be a tremendous advance for the Middle East, but most critically, it would be a massive improvement in the national security of the United States. I believe President Trump is providing the leadership that is necessary, and it's making our country a lot safer. I believe there is no deal to be had in terms of the nuclear program. The Ayatollah has shown that he's a liar. He's willing to lie. He wants to delay. His regime is in tatters. He wants time to rebuild. I don't think President Trump is going to fall for that. I think the only deal the Ayatollah can make is to say, I'm out of here. Let me leave. Let me go to Russia. Let me go to somewhere else other than here. That one deal is available to say, all right, we're done.
And in the protest in the streets, for those who are not murdered in the streets by the Iranian regime, they're shouting down with the Ayatollah and also no Shah. They do not want to have a dictatorial control over them again. They want to be more westernized. But it has come at a price for many who have already lost their lives, and many more might. And what we can expect, according to a former military special ops operator, watch for Iran to activate a full-blown drone warfare.
I can tell you drone warfare is relentless. It's this constant adaptation. It's electronic warfare layered over kinetic strikes, layered over cyber operations. Iran has been watching that. They've learned a lot from Russia. They've seen how low-cost, high-volume drone warfare can grind down a technologically superior force. They've seen how electronic warfare, jamming, drone swarms, it changes the battlefield. And I think, they've absolutely studied how Ukraine innovates in real time, where they've modified drones, shortened the kill chain, and they're trying to absorb those lessons and refine it for their own doctrine.
And I want to stress to you, the other day when I talked and joked about how Iran claims it could destroy an aircraft carrier, they had built one out of wood, blew it apart, so be it. It's out of wood, had no defense mechanism. And I'm making a joke of it, but I do not want you to take it lightly that Iran cannot cause damage. And this drone, multiple hordes of drones could certainly cause damage. And we've got men and women in a theater of war. Pray for them. And then, of course, there's a big question is what is going to happen when the shooting stops? What happens to Iran, the country, the people? The view of a former Israeli defense officer.
We should be very careful about who is going to take power in Iran if the regime will fall. Until now, I don't see anyone that is willing or aiming to take power. Just the only one that is speaking about it is the son of the Shah. But this guy left Iran, he was about 17 years old. And I'm not sure that although he's speaking about it, I'm not sure that he's ready or willing to live the easy life in the States and coming back to Iran and standing before this huge country and the huge problems that he is going to have there. This is something that we should consider. But having said that, we do have an interest to change the regime. I'm speaking about Israel, of course.
And, of course, we're connected to Israel, more so than many Democrats would want us to be. But we as a nation are connected to Israel. They're our greatest ally in that part of the world. And believe me, in that part of the world where regimes change, alliances change, you'd like to have stability. Israel is stable with the U.S., and we're stable with them as long as we keep some of the progressive Democrats, anti-Semites, out of control. They're still preaching about the genocide that took place, that Israel carried out against Gaza and Hamas. And I think the former Israeli defense officer is correct when he said the Green Prince, the former second in command or Shah, under the Shah in the Iran, probably does not want to leave the safety and the life of the U.S. to go back to living among the rocks as they rebuild Iran, if for nothing else, to save his life. But then we have the other issue, as he pointed out. They have additional concerns that maybe we are not properly addressing.
We do have an interest to change the regime. I'm speaking about Israel, of course. A few reasons. First of all, we need to finish once and for all the nuclear capabilities of Iran and bring them to zero. Second, the ballistic rockets, which is even in a way more strategically important for us than the nuclear weapon. Why? Because today Iran doesn't have a nuclear bomb, but they have about 2,000 ballistic rockets that they can shoot on Israel, or at least part of them on Israel, and it's a lot of damage. So in a way, I think the ballistic rockets are very, very important for us.
And obviously, you can see why. Because they're within striking distance of those missiles. And he points out that he believes that Witkoff, our ambassador heading up the talks, and Jared Kushner, who's with him, they're focusing on a lot of things in Iran, but maybe not as much on these ballistic missiles. And he's afraid if they don't get those covered, then we're going to have to do something about it. And I fully expect the IDF to do what it threatens to do. They don't speak politely and follow it up with a gift of candy. They speak directly, and they follow up with what they say they're going to do. Good for them. Still, whatever happens when it's all done is important to the world, not just that region. Senator Cruz.
It is entirely possible, Sean, that in the next 6 months, we will see the regimes fall in Iran, in Venezuela, and in Cuba. And we could also see governments replace them that want to be friends with the United States of America. Now, let me be clear. I'm not being Pollyannish about this. There are 1,000 things that can go wrong. But if that happens, this would be the most consequential geopolitical shift since the fall of the Berlin Wall, since America won the Cold War without firing a shot. I spoke with President Trump the day before yesterday, and we talked in particular about Iran. And I said, this moment, the regime is teetering. The Ayatollah is in his last days. And I said, do not let this opportunity pass. We have an opportunity. The Ayatollah routinely chants death to America. This is a regime that is the leading state sponsor of terrorism on the face of the planet. It is responsible for murdering hundreds of American servicemen and women. The Iranian regime has provided over 90% of the funding for Hamas and for Hezbollah.
And let me remind you, we don't know how many of these terrorists are inside our borders. We don't know how many of them Iranian jihadists are inside our borders now because of Joe Biden's open border policy. Let everyone in. Thank you, Joe Biden. The Department of Homeland Security now says 4 nations, citizens of 4 nations we would not allow in, are inside our borders. Nicaragua, Cuba, Haiti, Honduras. That's not to say all of them are a threat to America, but we don't know about these cells, where they are, what their plan is. And speaking of Nicaragua, it appears that 8% of the entire Nicaraguan population came across the border, now inside our nation. I don't know if they would be part of a terrorist cell or not. But there you go again. Lack of secure borders means you really have no nation and puts you at a very grave risk. Thank you, Joe Biden. Coming up, Fred Fleitz, 30 years in national intel with the CIA and other agencies. And our story behind the story, actor Robert Duvall and some connections to St. Louis and more. Lock and load. Ready on the right.
You are listening to Larry Connors, USA.
You should know that when I endorse Wellington Environmental, it's because I believe and know they will do you right. Wellington takes pride in providing homeowners and businesses whatever they need. You need some dustless blasting, they will take care of that. You need some mold remediation, they can do that. They take pride in training their team to perform multiple services and having the equipment ready to get jobs finished. That's important to you. You make just one call, and you call a company that's been around for more than 35 years with more than 45 technicians in the field. Most of you know finding good workers, then having them show up on time could be difficult. Not for Wellington Environmental. They're there at the designated time, ready to go. Check them out to see what they could do for you. Dustless blasting or anything else you need. Wellington Environmental, 314-644-4930. 314-644-4930. Be well with Wellington. The best thing I ever did for my neck and back pain was go to Esquire Sports Medicine. Dr. Draghi and his staff can take care of those pains. If they can't, they'll refer you to a specialist. And when you're hurting, you don't want to wait. So often with Dr. Draghi and Esquire Sports Medicine, you're treated within 24 hours. For any joint or muscle pain, contact my doctor, Dr. Draghi, Esquire Sports Medicine on Big Bend, just north of 40. EsquireSportsMedicine.com. Another day must be another roofer in town. And John Beal and I were talking. He said, every time you turn around, there's a new roofing company. Many of them have no idea what they're doing, and the statistics show that many will be out of business within 2 to 5 years. Who are you going to call to help you then? You need to remember only one name, John Beal. John Beal Roofing. You have a problem, he can take care of it. And we'll be here for you. John Beal Roofing. Call 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF. Renewal by Anderson asking, are you still battling cold drafts? Windows icing up again? Utility costs surging? You're worried about paying more every month? The truth is, you may already be paying for new windows and money lost to energy escaping your home. And here's the thing, you don't want to do this project twice. Renewal by Anderson spends every day replacing bad technology, poor installation of windows and doors that simply don't stand the test of time. But you can afford the best. America's most trusted window replacement company, Anderson. Call 877-WINDOWS or visit rbastl.com. Learn about our December savings event right now. 877-WINDOWS, rbastl.com. Renewal by Anderson. Superior products, exceptional service.
This is News Talk STL.
I can feel my face when I'm with you, but I love it, and I know she'll be the death of me, at least we'll both be numb, and she'll always get the best of me, the worst is yet to come, all the misery was necessary when we're deep in love, yes I know.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Welcome back. Recently, President Trump said Iran has 10, maybe 15 days to reach a nuclear deal or face bad things, and bad things are already beginning to build in Iran, and the U.S. is on the edge of it as well, and Russia, giving us an insight on what's happening inside Iran the best he can. Obviously has the expertise to go with it, 30-plus years in national intel, including the CIA. Now Vice Chair of the America First Policy Institute, Fred Fleitz. Fred, welcome aboard.
Hey, Larry, good to be here.
Well, so we're watching this buildup. We know that we are now having 2 aircraft carriers in the region, and we're going to have the Abraham Lincoln has been in the region. Now the Ford moving from the Caribbean, going through the Strait of Gibraltar to get in closer to Israel, and then we've got others ready. And then we watch the Strait of Hormuz shut down for supposedly a live fire practice with Iran and Russia participating. What is going on?
Well, it's really an unfortunate situation because President Trump is prepared to make a deal with Iran. And the Iranians met with his representatives, and they just weren't prepared to make any serious concessions. They just wanted to waste time. One U.S. official told the media that the talks were like a hamburger stuffed with nothing. And the Iranians are very skilled at this. They know that most presidents are happy to have talks. It makes it look like they're getting something done. But
right.
They are a means to an end, and there's no end here. So I think we're moving towards a military confrontation. I suspect the president will wait until after the State of the Union address is going to give next week. But the door's still open to a deal if the Iranians want it.
Now, let's break this down. We talked about the State of the Union. Let's begin there. A lot of folks are worried, could this happen this weekend? He can set some days, but that doesn't mean it's going to be a true deadline, plus minus one way or the other. But you do think no real military action will take place until after next Tuesday?
I think that's right. Now, the president said they have 10 days to decide. Well, we heard that in June when the president said they had 10 days, and I think 2 or 3 days later he attacked, and it was a surprise. The difference here is this will not be a surprise. The Iranians are ready. They probably think they can use their weapons to attack the American fleet, but I don't think they understand that Our military war games this constantly, and they have a number of tactics and some advanced weapons the Iranians do not know about.
Well, to that extent, I had earlier some information with a former military intel operative and talking about drones, using swarms of drones, jamming signals and overcoming whatever we have just because there's so much confusion.
I'm sure the Iranians plan to use drones to attack our forces, but we're better at drones than they are, and we have weapons to take out drones. They've been successful, and they've built drones that the Russians have used successfully in Ukraine. Our military knows all about that, and I think they'll be prepared.
The fearful line, though, Fred, and as you well know, we've got to be right every time. They only need to be right once. They would love nothing better than, even if it's a support ship, to be blown out of the water.
No, I think that's exactly right. But if Israel and the U.S. plans to attack, and we have to hope this doesn't happen, that we can find a way out of this, both countries just used a small percentage of their military might last June, and there's many, many facilities they didn't go near. I think if the Iranians were to try to engage both countries, they're going to be beaten very badly.
So what about this live fire exercise in the Strait of Hormuz the other day to shut down the strait for a couple of days? And during that time, Russia working with them, there apparently was a lot of movement inside Iran, moving missile batteries and so forth closer to their coastline.
I think they're trying to prepare for an attack, and the Supreme Leader also threatened to blow off a U.S. aircraft carrier, to sink an aircraft carrier. This doesn't seem to be a nation that's interested in a peaceful resolution. And, you know, they can move their forces as much as they want, but they are so inferior to what the U.S. and Israel has. And, you know, we know where their assets are.
Now, we do not know exactly what damage we did or did not cause with last summer's strikes, but sat photos are now showing they're rebuilding and retooling in some of those same areas.
I think we probably set back Iran's nuclear program 5 to 10 years, and quite a bit of it was just collapsed on it. In some instances, if they can get into these underground locations and tunnels, they've been poisoned by radioactive gas that happens when the enriched uranium gas was released, and other things that will make it very hazardous and difficult for them to get back. But it's been known for some time that the Iranians were engaged in defensive measures around these facilities so they wouldn't be damaged further. There's some facilities that were not damaged or only slightly damaged. I think they're especially concentrating on protecting areas where they're storing short-range and medium-range missiles, most of which were not destroyed.
All right, there brings the other issue, and that is from Israel, saying that they're worried that perhaps Witkoff, our peace negotiator, along with Jared Kushner, are focused too much on the big picture of Iran and the nuclear weapons, and those ballistic missiles are crucial regarding Israel.
The Israelis have wanted to conduct another attack for several months because they're worried that Iran's short-range and medium-range missiles could be fired at Israel. And they also know the Iranians have figured a way through Israel's Golden Dome missile defense. If they concentrate on one spot, they can get through it. They can't do a lot of damage, but they will kill Israelis. And I think that's what Iran's tactic will be. It won't be a lot of damage, but they will maybe be able to destroy a town if they concentrate all their missiles and drones at one location.
I have no doubt that they will be cooperating and working with the USA as we need them and they need us. But I also believe that they will probably set their own path as they always have.
I think that's right. The Israelis have been ready for this for a long time. For the state of Israel, this is an existential threat. This is a fanatic country that its leaders have constantly threatened to wipe Israel off the map. If you're an Israeli, if you're a Jew, you take threats like that very seriously. You take them literally.
And you've got the people that have been killed in the streets, some even in hospitals because they were considered to be among the protesters, trying to overthrow the current regime, and also saying we don't want an Ayatollah and we don't want a Shah. They want to be a more Western country.
Tens of thousands, I think, have been killed. And I think your point about the Shah is exactly right. I think the Shah has significant support, the Shah's son, but also significant opposition because the Shah did not have a good reputation when he was in power. He was a pretty ruthless leader. I think his son seems to be pretty decent, and he's someone who the Iranian people could unite around, but not all Iranian Americans or Iranians agree with me on that.
And one Israeli leader believes that he has no interest he will talk the talk, but he really has no interest in returning to that country and the condition it's in now, much less what it might be in after all of this is finished.
I haven't. I thought there was a possibility that the Shah's son might go back, but you might be right. I hadn't heard that.
Well, I'm not. I'm just relaying what I've heard from IDF from time to time. But what would happen when all the shooting stops?
Well, that's a really good question, because the U.S. is not going to bomb the Ayatollah and his government out of power. They're going to embolden the protest, encourage them, maybe weaken security forces, but it's still going to be a long and bloody struggle. I think the president has to have a long-term strategy, which he has to explain to the American people why the Iranian government is still in place after we bomb the heck of it, probably next week.
All right. And again, that would be following the Tuesday night State of the Union address. But right now, we have fingers on the trigger. We're just waiting for the order.
I think that's right. And I believe the president's getting frustrated because he really was willing to make the Iranians a deal, and I think they believe they can manipulate him. And they made that mistake in June. It looks like they're making the same mistake now.
And what support are we going to get in the international community?
Well, the international community hates this, and obviously they'd rather go through the UN. They would rather that there'd be some type of united coalition. The international community didn't like it when Israel and the U.S. attacked last year, but most of them secretly supported it, because they admitted, well, look, Iran is making near weapons grade uranium. That's bad, but you should have gone through the UN. We can't go through the UN because the Russians and Chinese will veto anything we want to do. I think after this is done, we will get support from most of our allies, but right now they don't have the courage to back us.
Back one final question again as to what happens afterwards in Iran. Chaos, the fighting between the various religious groups and tribes, what would be left?
Well, I think there's a big question as to if the government is overthrown, or let's say the leaders leave, who and what will govern it. I think there's going to be a lot of instability. We don't have a good answer for that.
So we're back to the devil we know versus the devil we don't?
The devil we know is awfully bad.
Yeah.
So we need to put thought into helping with a transition to a moderate government. And I'm sure that our government and our allies are working on that, but I frankly don't have a good answer.
And how close does that come to, quote, nation building?
Well, we're not going to send troops in there and try to occupy the country and force a new system on them. This is something the Iranian people have to do.
Fred Fleitz, Vice Chair of the American First Policy Institute, thank you very much, as always, for your time. Your expertise is undeniable. Thank you, sir.
Good to be here. Thank you.
God bless. Fred Fleitz. So perhaps nothing happens till after Tuesday. We will see. Coming up, the story behind the story, focusing on deceased actor Robert Duvall.
You can connect with Larry on Twitter at Larry Connors USA.
I've told you how Tom Shaw Realtors can help you buy, sell homes, farms, acreage. Listen to what Tom Shaw Realtors did in 2025. More than 100 properties sold, $52 million in sales. ShawRealtors.com. 2026, a great time to visit Lit Cigar Lounge. The Lit Cigar Facebook has numerous events from tastings to music. My main reason for going to Lit is always quality cigars, premium whiskeys. Odds are we'll see each other at Lit Cigar Lounge. A few doors down, Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta. Get a pizza baked over coals. Excellent crust and flavor. Or choose one of the many great pasta dishes. You won't leave hungry. Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta and Lit Cigar Lounge in the Chesterfield Valley. Renewal by Anderson asking, are you still battling cold drafts? Windows icing up again? Utility costs surging? You're worried about paying more every month? The truth is, you may already be paying for new windows and money lost to energy escaping your home. And here's the thing, you don't want to do this project twice. Renewal by Anderson spends every day replacing bad technology, poor installation of windows and doors that simply don't stand the test of time. But you can afford the best. America's most trusted window replacement company, Anderson. Call 877-WINDOWS or visit rbastl.com. Learn about our December savings event right now. 877-WINDOWS, rbastl.com. Renewal by Anderson. Superior products, exceptional service. Ever been in a wreck or felt as if you've been in a wreck? My advice, contact Dr. Bill Draghi, Esquire Sports Medicine. Yes, they can treat wreck victims, falls, other hazards of life, sports injuries. I go at least twice a month. That keeps the joints in line. Part of your spine get out of line, you start compensating, you're going to have additional pain. Don't be that guy. Visit Esquire Sports Medicine, Big Bend, just north of 40, EsquireSportsMedicine.com.
This is News Talk STL.
There's pigeons down on Market Square. She's standing in her underwear, looking down from a hotel room. The nightfall will be coming soon. Oh my, oh hell yes. You got to put on that party dress. It was too cold to cry when I woke up alone. I hit my last number, I walked to the road. Let's dance with Mary Jane. One more time to kill the pain.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA. Now, Larry Connors with the story behind the story.
Napalm, son! Nothing else in the world smells like that! I love the smell of napalm in the morning. You know, one time we had a hail bomb for 12 hours, and when it was all over, I woke up. We didn't find one of them, not one stinking dink body. Smell! You know that gasoline smell? The whole hill. It smells like victory. Someday this war's gonna end.
Robert Duvall. His world ended this week at age 95. That is, of course, one of the more famous clips from the Apocalypse Now 1979 movie, and that remark, "I love the smell of napalm in the morning," is regarded as an iconic statement in cinema. Robert Duvall, born January 1931, and as we said, passed away the 15th of this month, earlier this week, at age 95. He does have ties to St. Louis, so we're going to get into some of that as well. He's also well known for the work in The Godfather. Now, before we get too deep into The Godfather, let me go through some of the other film credits and things he did that maybe you weren't aware of. Let's go back to a career that began and then ended up spanning 7 decades, where he received an Academy Award, 4 Golden Globe Awards, 2 Primetime Emmy Awards, Screen Actors Guild Award, always acclaimed for his technical proficiency and chameleon-like ability to assume a convincing role. One labeled him as the American Olivier, and that label stuck. I often saw Duvall, and in many cases, I detected, and this is not to say anything bad about him, but it seemed to be the same kind of cadence and remarks, and it was all, you could just tell it was Duvall. And yet he did get himself deep into each character. He was raised in the Christian Science religion. And there is one part of his relationship to St. Louis. His father was in the U.S. Naval Academy, and at one point they ended up moving from Annapolis, Maryland, and he ended up attending Principia in St. Louis before graduating with a Bachelor of Arts degree in Principia College in Illinois in 1953. His father expected him to attend the Naval Academy, but Duvall said, and I'm quoting, "I was terrible at everything but acting. I could barely get through school." He said, "I did serve in the U.S. Army after the Korean War, leaving as private first class." He said, "That's led some confusion in the press. Some stories have me shooting it out with the commies from a foxhole over frozen chosen, Pork Chop Hill and stuff." He said, "Hell, I barely qualified with the M1 in basic training." In the winter of 55, he began attending a neighborhood playhouse school at the theater in New York City. And there was where he got recognized, and tells a story about how he was then offered his first opportunity.
I did a play at the neighborhood playhouse way back called The Midnight Caller. And that night, Kim Stanley came, Robert Mulligan, Horton, and his wife. I played a drunk guy, kid guy, looking for some of his girlfriend. And about 2 years later, when they were to cast the part of To Kill a Mockingbird, Horton Foote's wife said, "What about that boy we saw at the neighborhood playhouse?" So that's what, and Robert Mulligan, the director, had been there that night. So it was my first part. And I did about 4 or 5 nice films with Horton.
And To Kill a Mockingbird, he was Boo Radley. To Kill the Mockingbird, 1962. Now, originally, he was to have one line. They ended up cutting that one line. So throughout the entire movie, Boo Radley, Robert Duvall, well, he's a prime suspect in the story of To Kill a Mockingbird. He is never stating anything. He was a recluse, and they decided to continue to portray him that way. He appeared in a number of films during the 60s, mostly mid-sized parts. Had a small part as a cab driver who ferried Steve McQueen around just before that massive chase scene in the film Bullet, 1968. He also had a part in True Grit, where he was in a shootout with John Wayne's Rooster Cogburn. He also ended up in MASH and even in The Twilight Zone. But the real recognition, in addition to those, also included Lonesome Dove, Augustus McCrae. Great book and great movie. In fact, Duvall said that is my favorite character of all time, being Augustus McCrae in the movie Lonesome Dove. If you haven't seen it, read the book, I strongly encourage you to do it. But then came something called The Godfather.
I found out about this Captain McCluskey who broke Mike's jaw. What about him? Now, he's definitely on Sollozzo's payroll and for big money. See? McCluskey has agreed to be the Turk's bodyguard. What you have to understand, Sonny, is that while Sollozzo is being guarded like this, he is invulnerable. Now, nobody has ever gunned down a New York police captain, never. It would be disastrous. All the 5 families would come after you, Sonny. The Corleone family would be outcast. Even the old man's political protection would run for cover. So do me a favor. Take this into consideration.
So that's Duvall as the consigliere in Godfather 1. He also did the same role in Godfather 2. He was the legal counsel. He was an adopted son of the Godfather, and then tapped to serve as their legal counsel and represent them. But when it came to a Godfather number 3, once again to play Tom Hagen, the consigliere, he declined. Why? Well, He said, if they're not going to pay me proper, then I'm not taking it. In fact, he was quoted on 60 Minutes. If they paid Pacino twice what they paid me, that's fine, but not 3 or 4 times. So he walked away from it. He also appeared in a movie called The Great Santini.
You may now have the privilege of serving under the meanest, toughest, screamingest squadron commander in the Marine Corps. Me. Has the great Santini ever let his family down? Yes! You don't trust the great Santini? No! I don't want you to consider me as just your commanding officer. I want you to look on me like I was God.
Every drill instructor tells troops that. And those were the lines he delivered to his fellow Marines. But you heard in the background, he's saying some of that while he's talking to his kids in the car. And they're not going to look at him like that. The Great Santini was another excellent movie, and the portrayal by Robert Duvall was amazing. Here he was, a Marine commander, but there was no war to be involved in. His war kind of became an inner war, and with his family. The Great Santini. Do you know what movie he did that won him an Oscar? And do you know there's still another St. Louis connection other than Principia? Well, think about it, because there is more to the story behind the story.
You are listening to Larry Connors, USA.
Do you know why I endorse Cafe Napoli, all the locations? Visit any of them, and you will quickly appreciate the quality of food, service, atmosphere. So maybe I'll see you at Cafe Napoli in Clayton, Napoli Kirkwood, Napoli 2 in Town and Country, Napoli 3 in St. Charles, right next door to Napoli C. Or maybe you'll find me at Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta in the Chesterfield Valley. Now you know why I endorse Napoli, NapoliSTL.com.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA. Now, the end of the story behind the story.
I'll be everything this man can be before I start. If you just hold the ladder, baby, I'll climb to the top. If you just hold the ladder, baby, I'll climb to the
I think it's a valid film, valid enough that we have gotten very much applause of a certain kind from certain members of the country western community, such as my friend Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson, Waylon Jennings, and this is certainly a very high level of criticism coming from those people. And if I didn't have that on one hand, I would feel that this, on the other hand, was not complete. But the combination of both tonight makes this a very complete and exciting evening for me tonight. And I want to thank the Academy very much for this award. I'm very happy. Thank you.
That was the night that Robert Duvall won his first Emmy. He played a country western singer in Tender Mercies. That was him doing the singing. And as you heard him say, the fact that we got not just the award, but I got acclaim from other country western singers and entertainers, like my good friends, Johnny Cash among them, he said, and Waylon Jennings, he said, that really is a payoff for me. Francis Ford Coppola described Duvall at one point as, quote, one of the 4 or best 5 actors in the world. It's very high ranking. His other connection to St. Louis. Robert Duvall is a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and there'd been talk about putting one in St. Louis Walk of Fame, but apparently was not enough to decide it would be proper because he wasn't truly St. Louis, just attending Principia. I disagree with that. Should put it one in. He was married 4 times, did not have any children. As he said in one interview, he said, I tried with a lot of different women in and out of marriage. I guess I'm shooting blanks. Robert Duvall. He ended up meeting his first wife, a former announcer and dancer on the Jackie Gleason show, while he was filming To Kill a Mockingbird. Second marriage to Gail Young, married to him from 82 to 86. Third marriage, Sarah Brophy, a dancer. Fourth wife, Luciana Pedraza from Argentina. He said, I met her in Argentina. The flower shop was closed, so I went to the bakery. If the flower shop had been open, I never would have met her. He was 41 years older, and they'd been together since 1997. He produced, directed, and acted with her in the Assassination Tango in 2002, filmed in Buenos Aires. And in fact, Duvall is known as was known obviously as a skilled Argentine tango dancer. He also trained in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Political views, he kept them to himself, did not wear them on his sleeve. Variously described as libertarian, conservative. Personally invited George W. Bush's inauguration. He did support Rudy Giuliani's campaign in the 2008 Republican presidential nomination. 2008, he was on stage with John McCain and Sarah Palin, I should say. He also endorsed nominee Mitt Romney. Otherwise, he stayed out of that and stayed to what he knew best, acting, entertaining, because he knew that's what the audience wanted. He died at his farm in Virginia, the 15th of this month at the age of 95. Robert Duvall. Monday, the story behind the story. The ugly truth behind TV and radio ratings. How do they get them? That will be Monday. We still have another hour to go for you. Remember our pledge, one nation under God.
You can hear podcasts of this program at Larry Connors USA Facebook. Larry Connors USA Facebook.
John Bill Roofing reminds you we are in the stormy season, and that means if you have even the smallest leak in your roof, you could soon have a much bigger issue. Call John Bill to make sure that your biggest investment is protected. That call can save you major dollars. If you do get hit during a storm, John Bill has a rapid response team. Call 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF, John Bill. Ever been in a wreck or felt as if you've been in a wreck? My advice, contact Dr. Bill Draghi, Esquire Sports Medicine. Yes, they can treat wreck victims, falls, other hazards of life, sports injuries. I go at least twice a month. That keeps the joints in line. Part of your spine get out of line, you start compensating, you're going to have additional pain. Don't be that guy. Visit Esquire Sports Medicine, Big Bend, just north of 40. EsquireSportsMedicine.com. There's only one place you can get pizza cooked over coals. Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta in Chesterfield Valley. Of course, Napoli Brothers has a great selection of pasta dishes. Between the pizza and pasta, trust me, you will not leave hungry. Then, a few doors down, Lit Cigar Lounge, a wide variety of quality cigars, each offering a unique smoke. That cigar, some premium whiskey, all you need to do is enjoy. Lit Cigar Lounge and Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta, Chesterfield Valley. It's that time of season when families, businesses are moving. For local or long distance, I endorse McGuire Moving. Get a date set soon before the schedules are booked. 314-241-0600. 241-0600. McGuire is constantly giving back to our veterans, such as Support Dogs for Our Brave. So with McGuire, you're getting excellent service and helping our vets. McGuireMoving.com. So many times, Vincent's Jewelers has helped me surprise someone special. Vincent's locally owned can do the same for you, and you don't have to break the bank to get something really nice, maybe even customized. The smile you're going to get back from that special someone, priceless. Check Vincent'sJewelers.com every day because new items are arriving and there are special deals. Vincent's, my only jeweler. Vincent'sJewelers.com. Vincent'sJewelers.com. Renewal by Anderson asking, are you still battling cold drafts? Windows icing up again? Utility costs surging? You're worried about paying more every month? The truth is, you may already be paying for new windows and money lost to energy escaping your home. And here's the thing, you don't want to do this project twice. Renewal by Anderson spends every day replacing bad technology, poor installation of windows and doors that simply don't stand the test of time. But you can afford the best. America's most trusted window replacement company, Anderson. Call 877-WINDOWS or visit rbastl.com. Learn about our December savings event right now. 877-WINDOWS, rbastl.com. Renewal by Anderson. Superior products, exceptional service.
This is News Talk STL.
Answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Now is the time for Iran to join us on a path that will complete what we're doing. And if they join us, that'll be great. If they don't join us, that'll be great too. But it'll be a very different path. They cannot continue to threaten the stability of the entire region, and they must make a deal. Or if that doesn't happen, I maybe can understand. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But bad things will happen if it doesn't.
The words are very direct from President Trump. And earlier this week, he said, Iran, you basically have 10 days to reach a decision. And it's basically not a deadline. He said it was, but it's really not. He's also indicated it could be up to 15, but trying to put pressure on them. When you go to those peace talks to meet with my envoy, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, you need to be really willing to talk peace, and that would include primarily abandon all of your desires to have nuclear facilities to make nuclear weapons. Satellite photos show that the strikes we made against the Iranian nuclear centrifuge locations last year, they're in the process of rebuilding, opening up the tunnels, trying to get inside. And we also know this last weekend they were holding, or this last week they've been holding live fire exercises across the Strait of Hormuz, basically shutting down that lane of traffic for ships because no ship wants to go down that strait in case they get hit by accident during the live ammunition fires. And Russia was participating in that. And therein raises the issue about, while Russia is telling everyone, let's be cautious here, let's take our time, they're not sounding as direct, violent, and basically revengeful as they had previously, but they're still actively helping Iran because there's no doubt during that time, while the Strait of Hormuz has been shut down, Iran has been moving some of its missile batteries and others closer to their coastline so they can strike Israel or any other site. So it was a subterfuge, which we all knew. And, as I said, photosats show that they're still actively trying to reopen one of the sites we bombed over the summer. As I'd said earlier, fingers are on the triggers. Hopefully no one pulls either by accident or by order. Welcome to hour number 2, Larry Connors USA. We're here every Monday through Friday for you from 6 to 8 p.m. And when we're on the air, we are streaming video for you. You can watch via Rumble, NewsTalkSTL, NewsTalkSTL Rumble, Larry Connors USA Rumble, Larry Connors USA Facebook. Everything later goes up as a podcast, video and audio, at NewsTalkSTL and LarryConnorsUSA.com. And reminding you, your cell phone is your radio. You put our free app on your phone. It costs you nothing. And then you can open up that app wherever you are, anywhere in the world. If you have internet connection, you can listen to this program wherever you are, or any of the other great programming we have on the air. NewsTalk STL. And, of course, we, with NewsTalk STL, Larry Connors USA, do deliver news, analysis, commentary, and education. You're going to know more when we finish this hour than you do right now. And one of the big issues you're going to learn more about is the Supreme Court today ruling that Trump's tariff plan is wrong. It's illegal. What happens next? Is there another play that Trump can make? Do we have to repay the tariffs collected from other nations? I've got a guest from the Heritage Foundation coming up later to address those very issues. Back to the crisis in front of us. One former military special ops said, you can look for what Iran has been doing in getting drones ready.
Iran, as usual, keeps thinking they can get away with it, that America isn't watching. And this posturing for war, I think, is a major mistake on behalf of the Iranians. The history shows it only ends badly for them. Between us and the Israelis, we have a lot of intelligence information on them. They like to hide their drone operations under this guise of exercises, but yet we're almost, flying ours in broad daylight. And I think that's the difference between a regime pretending to project strength and a real military that actually has it. What we're seeing right now, it's not just this routine military maneuvering. It's a chess match in the air. Iran's repositioning strike drones under the cover of these drills with Russia. And that tells me two things immediately. First, they still don't want transparency. And second, they're testing this battle positioning under plausible deniability. And by the way, let's not forget that this is exactly what Russia did before they went to war in Ukraine. They lied to the world, and they even, with their own soldiers saying they were conducting military drills, they went across the border and conducted operations.
Yeah, they did. And we all knew that was probably the next step, even if you're not on the top level of intel information. When Russia began to gather around the borders of Ukraine, they weren't just going there for a picnic. They weren't going there for, quote, military drills. They were putting equipment and people in place to invade Ukraine, which, in fact, they did because of the inadequate response from the Biden administration. They knew Biden would blink. And I still do believe, truly in my heart, that if Trump had been in office and Biden had not been put in by all of the cheating that took place in the electoral vote, in the counting across the nation, if Trump had been in office, the Ukraine invasion would not have happened then. And I want you to keep something in mind. We're not just talking about a political action by one country. We're talking about the deaths of thousands upon thousands, not just Ukrainians, young Russians sent to their death. None of that would have happened. But back to where we are right now, in dealing with Iran. And that military special ops operator said Iran is looking at how they can use their drones to basically overcome. They think they can overcome what we have in the region.
I can tell you drone warfare is relentless. It's this constant adaptation. It's electronic warfare layered over kinetic strikes, layered over cyber operations. Iran has been watching that. They've learned a lot from Russia. They've seen how low-cost, high-volume drone warfare can grind down a technologically superior force. They've seen how electronic warfare, jamming, drone swarms, it changes the battlefield. And I think, they've absolutely studied how Ukraine innovates in real time, where they've modified drones, shortened the kill chain, and they're trying to absorb those lessons and refine it for their own doctrine.
And all of that is true, and they're going to do what they can get away with. In the end, one way or the other, we're going to see a change in Iran.
The Iranian regime has provided over 90% of the funding for Hamas and for Hezbollah. To see the mullahs toppled would be a tremendous advance for the people of Iran. It would be a tremendous advance for the Middle East, but most critically, it would be a massive improvement in the national security of the United States. I believe President Trump is providing the leadership that is necessary, and it's making our country a lot safer. I believe there is no deal to be had in terms of the nuclear program. The Ayatollah has shown that he's a liar. He's willing to lie. He wants to delay. His regime is in tatters. He wants time to rebuild. I don't think President Trump is going to fall for that. I think the only deal the Ayatollah can make is to say, I'm out of here. Let me leave. Let me go to Russia. Let me go to somewhere else other than here. That one deal is available to say, all right, we're done.
That would save him, but I'm sure he would still have others in his stead to carry on the fight. And they probably would, with or without his direction. And they would be sacrificial lambs when you get down to it. And once you hear from a view of what happens to Iran in the process and afterwards, and this comes from a former Israeli defense officer.
We should be very careful about who is going to take power in Iran if the regime will fall. Until now, I don't see anyone that is willing or aiming to take power. Just the only one that is speaking about it is the son of the Shah. But this guy left Iran. He was about 17 years old. And I'm not sure that although he's speaking about it, I'm not sure that he's ready or willing to live the easy life in the States and coming back to Iran and standing before this huge country and the huge problems that he is going to have there. This is something that we should consider. But having said that, we do have an interest to change the regime. I'm speaking about Israel, of course.
Now, one thing he pointed out also, the peace talks underway, being carried out by our ambassador, Steve Witkoff, with Jared Kushner in Geneva. He said they're focusing on the big picture, and the most critical picture, obviously, Iran and nuclear weapons. But he says, I don't think they're giving the attention that's needed to something that concerns and brings fear for Israelis, and that is the ballistic missile system they have. That if they don't do something to curb them and destroy them, then you can expect Iran to use those to fire into Israel. And they'll probably have some unknown number right now that could get through the Golden Dome. They have in the past. And for every missile that drops into Israel, more than likely there'll be casualties. So while they like to see the talks underway, you can bet that the Israeli Defense Forces are making their own plans, as they should. We have peace in Gaza right now. Other nations signing on to help the U.S. rebuild the region. But at the same time, we have to recognize the Gaza peace is still very unstable.
Well, you have to give just huge credit to President Trump's leadership to establishing this Board of Peace. It was endorsed by the UN Security Council 13-0. So for all of the naysayers out there, saying he just invented this out of whole cloth, no, the UN put their stamp on it. Why was that so necessary? Well, for the countries contributing troops, and we have pledges of over 8,000 now, the main one being Indonesia, they needed that kind of UN stamp of international law in order to be able to put a stabilization force in. So we have the stabilization force going, $7 billion in pledges today that were announced for reconstruction. And to your point, the humanitarian aid is flowing at unprecedented levels. 13 weeks now, we've exceeded the 4,000 trucks per week that a number of international agencies have said were what all 2 million Gazans need to survive. This is medicine, shelter, food, and credit to our amazing military that are there coordinating all of this between the aid agencies, the UN, the Israelis, and others to make it happen. And as we said to President Trump today, he knows this, but I mean, literally what he put together and his team are saving lives.
That is UN Ambassador Michael Waltz referencing the Board of Peace that Trump put together. He's vowing that the U.S. will put $10 billion in to help with this. And these other nations, they're ponying up another $7+ billion because they don't want that to become another desperate zone for terrorists. Of course, we also have to worry about all the illegals that have come into our nation. We're still trying to gather them up and get them out. We don't know how many are members of active terrorist cells waiting for something to do with Iran before they take action. But Secretary Noem says we're in a better position today than we were when Trump came in.
Yeah, it's shocking to me to hear them constantly speak on behalf of politics instead of the American people. And Americans are going to have a choice coming up here if they want to choose the Democrats' mass migration and infiltration of criminals, but not just criminals. We have thousands of known and suspected terrorists that the Biden administration let into this country. Or they can continue to choose President Trump, who's making our country safe again, who's making it more affordable for families to get into homes and to buy their groceries and put gas in their car. He's giving them safety back in their communities, and that's what the Department of Homeland Security does every single day. What Democrats have done by defunding this department is put our safety at risk right here on our own soil. The Democrats are saying, no, we want to play politics and we want to risk the lives of Americans.
And they are. And to that extent, the Department of Homeland Security is now halting at least disaster-related travel at FEMA. In other words, if there's a disaster and it doesn't need to be addressed immediately, the Department of Homeland Security is stopping all travel for the duration of the so-called shutdown. If they're doing that at the federal level, it will not be long if this, quote, shutdown the Democrats are orchestrating because they do not want to have a next election protected by the SAVE Act. If that continues, it will not be long, as I've said, before small regional airports will decide we just have to shut down. We don't have agents to operate TSA. Airlines will shut down, not only in the small airports, but larger airports. That is going to be on the back of those fighting for this shutdown. President Trump will be addressing it, no doubt, in Tuesday's State of the Union address. And my guest last hour said he does not think there will be any shooting regarding Iran until after Tuesday, after the president delivers his State of the Union. Of course, then again, it could happen in the midst of his State of the Union. We will be carrying that live for you next Tuesday. We'll be doing an entire Larry Connors USA program, and immediately after that, the State of the Union. Coming up, President Trump talking about releasing more files, all files, regarding UFOs. And what about the Supreme Court ruling on his tariffs? My guest will address that issue. Lock and load, ready on the right.
listening to Larry Connors, USA.
Previously, I've told you about dustless blasting, a special service offered by Wellington Environmental. It could work for you in your place. Recently, a crew removed a driveway sealer that had failed. The owner wanted to go back to the original concrete so it could be properly sealed. Dustless blasting worked. That homeowner is happy. Now, sometimes surfaces need pressure washing instead of blasting. In fact, there was an exterior stone fireplace cleansed by pressure washing, and when it dried, all the dark stain was gone. That stone had its original appearance. Wellington is versatile with blasting. Dustless blasting or whatever you need. They will evaluate and make a decision. How do you get them to your door? Very easy. Call 314-644-4930. 644-4930. Wellington Environmental, making your world great. In fact, be safe, be well with Wellington Environmental. McGuire Moving is silver certified, which means they are great at relocating senior citizens. In fact, McGuire is a household name because McGuire understands the stress involved when moving older adults. So if you or family members need help moving, I highly recommend McGuire Moving. 314-241-0600. 241-0600. Get a free in-home estimate. McGuireMoving.com. So many times, Vincent's Jewelers has helped me surprise someone special. Vincent's, locally owned, can do the same for you, and you don't have to break the bank to get something really nice, maybe even customized. The smile you're going to get back from that special someone, priceless. Check Vincent'sJewelers.com every day because new items are arriving and there are special deals. Vincent's, my only jeweler. Vincent'sJewelers.com. Vincent'sJewelers.com. Ever been in a wreck or felt as if you've been in a wreck? My advice, contact Dr. Bill Draghi, Esquire Sports Medicine. Yes, they can treat wreck victims, falls, other hazards of life, sports injuries. I go at least twice a month. That keeps the joints in line. Part of your spine get out of line, you start compensating, you're going to have additional pain. Don't be that guy. Visit Esquire Sports Medicine, Big Bend, just north of 40. EsquireSportsMedicine.com.
This is NewsTalkSTL. This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Well, so the Supreme Court striking down 6-3 decision, not even close, the Trump tariffs. What happens next? Well, they sweep aside his tariffs. Some say they wiped out a cannon of his economic strategy. Joining us now to give us a better picture on it, Stephen Padfield with the Heritage Foundation. Stephen, glad to have you on board.
Thanks so much for having me.
First of all, did you expect this ruling from the Supreme Court?
Yeah, I do think that I certainly expected it. I think a lot of people expected it. So, for the most part, while there's always a chance, this is pretty much in line with expectations, although maybe the scope of it is a little broader than some expected. But ultimately, the full extent of the president's tariff program was very likely to be undercut by this ruling.
Now, the ruling, did it or did it not focus on the prime issue as does he have the authority versus the legislative branch, which is authorized to set tariffs and things of that nature? He used
it's very critical.
He used an emergency power declaration.
That's right. So it's very critical to understand that all that the court ruled was that under IEPA, this particular statute with the emergency powers, the power to use tariffs was not granted, right? That basically that's a taxing power and that rests with Congress, and that they did not delegate that under that particular statute. But the president still has a number of other ways to impose tariffs. Trade Act of 1974 has multiple sections. We've got the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, Tariff Act of 1930. So we fully expect the tariffs to continue in just various forms. One thing that we're looking for is a more specific country by country analysis and application rather than just broad swaths of across the board tariffs that capture multiple countries at the same time. So it's important not to overstate what the court did here.
Since you brought up the 70s, the 1970s era law did allow the president to, quote, regulate imports when necessary to respond to national emergencies that pose an unusual and extraordinary threat. So that's what he was basing that decision on. That seems to be, on one hand, very clear that he has the authority.
Yeah, it's definitely a colorable, reasonable argument. It's understandable why the president went with that. But I think the court today was very clear that the basis for arguing that the regulation of imports was sufficient to reach the tariffs was simply not there. It was based on an older statute. It was based on an older opinion that was very narrowly decided. So when the court took a big step back and looked just at the text of the statute, the understanding of what tariffs are and which branch of the government gets to impose them and use them as taxes. I think the ruling ultimately was the correct one statutorily. But again, there are many powers that are expressly granting the president the power to use tariffs that he can now pivot towards.
So he's the first president to invoke the emergency action on tariffs in nearly 50-year history. And Chief Justice John Roberts wrote, I love this quote, "We claim no special competence in matters of economics or foreign affairs. We claim only, as we must, the limited role assigned to us by Article 3 of the Constitution. Fulfilling that role, we hold that IEPA does not authorize the president to impose tariffs." So they're looking at it strictly constitutionally, which for those of us who say that's what we want, we should be thankful for that. And it really proves to the leftists this is not a bought and rubber stamping Supreme Court for Donald Trump.
I think that's absolutely right. I think there's some really important points there, as you say. One is the court very clearly is not making any statements about the pros and cons of tariffs as an economic tool. They're simply applying the statute, one particular statute. And I think you're absolutely right about the fact that to the extent we always hear these arguments about the court being so politicized, and we've heard allegations of a rubber stamp, this is clearly the court coming out with the conservative justices on board, right, in large part to say, no, we're not going to let the president use this particular statute for this purpose. So I think there's a lot of good things for conservatives to take from this opinion.
So what's the timeline? Now, the ruling is there. And let me compare it to any other Supreme Court ruling that comes out on a particular case of students being allowed to integrate a school, as we had in the past, versus a timeline of dealing with these tariffs. What happens next?
Well, I think there's a couple of issues. So one is certainly whether or not and how refunds might be available to plaintiffs and other businesses that have claims tied to the tariffs. That'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. I still need to dig into that myself to get a little more background. And then the other is how quickly the president pivots to the other bases for tariff power. And I think we should expect that to be very quick. I'm sure that the administration was ready for this result, right, as much as they may dislike it. And so I think we should see the tariffs potentially continue in some form almost unabated, although we certainly would hope, I think, as a country, that there's some sort of, working with Congress on these sorts of issues.
So we talked about the various outs, and before I go down that road deeper, the point being, how do the other nations that are the receiving end of the tariffs, how would they be looking at it, and what should we expect them to do or not do?
Well, it's a little bit outside of my wheelhouse, but I have to say I think that they fully understand that the president is going to continue with this strategy, given that he has the power in other forms. And I think the president views what has happened with the tariffs to be ultimately a success. And so I think they need to be ready to continue these negotiations, to continue to be willing to come to the table and make some concessions. And so that would be my expectation if I had to place a bet on how the other countries are viewing this. I don't think that they're expecting that because of this Supreme Court opinion, all of a sudden tariffs are not going to be an issue for them. I think they will realize that very well that's going to continue.
Well, to that extent, the president has said, I will now, and I agree with you, they had to be prepared for whatever came out, so he's got to have other aces up his sleeve, as you pointed out, some of them, but he's already said, I will sign an executive order to impose 10% tariffs on all nations, at least replacing part of the tariffs overturned.
I am so sorry. I lost you for about a minute there. Can you repeat the question?
Oh, I will, because I'm so well briefed here. The president, as you said, and I agree, they were always preparing for what do we do next? So they had plans. He's got aces up his sleeve. But what he's already indicated and said today, I will sign an executive order to impose 10% tariffs on all nations, therefore replacing part of those overturned.
Yeah, that's going to be very interesting. I mean, it's certainly the case that we can never fault President Trump for a lack of creativity, right? He's a deal maker. He looks at opportunities to take advantage of situations that others might not see. I think he's done that very well. And so I really have not, again, this is an area in terms of the ability to do this through executive action other than under the statutes that we've already talked about. That's something I would really have to dig into a bit more. But it doesn't surprise me at all to hear that he's going to at least run that up the flagpole and see how it plays.
So the Supreme Court basically has said he cannot use provisions of the Trade Act of 1974 using the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. But there was also an allowance, was there not, that he could impose tariffs for 15% for up to 150 days before anything gets stripped. And I'm not trying to ambush you. I know you're not on the legal side as much as the financial side, but where does that stand, do you think?
Well, I'm still digesting the opinion myself, so I'll take you at your word that they, said that and put that on the table. I'm sure anything that the court has essentially given their stamp of approval on in terms of the power that is there is going to be used fully. And I'm also, if I was a betting man, I would say anything that's a gray area, the administration is going to see if they can make a reasonable argument for pushing further as well. So at the very least, we should expect full use of anything that the court here has said is available.
All right, Stephan, I want to thank you for being willing to jump into the fire with a lot of it still burning. That's very brave of you on behalf of the Heritage Foundation to help give my audience a better understanding anyway at this point.
Thanks so much. Happy to do it. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you, Stephan. We'll do it again. Thank you for your time and your expertise. Stephan Padfield with the Heritage Foundation. Yeah, Trump had to be ready, and obviously his legal team, you're always ready that what if it doesn't come down our way? And I don't know if they had some tea leaves that were already indicating it was not going to go his way or not, judging by some of the oral arguments and so forth that were taking place in advance of the Supreme Court ruling. But the president's been taking questions or took questions earlier today about SCOTUS trying to reject his sweeping authority, and he's made it very clear that he will go ahead and move forward with an executive order. We'll see how that stands up. And he said this Liberation Day tariffs, we're not done with it. We will revive them one way or the other. George H. Bush appointed Thomas and Brett Kavanaugh by Trump, and George W. Bush appointed Alito all to Senate. They were the three dissensions. Coming up, what about UFO papers being released? More details on that still to come.
Twitter at Larry Connors USA.
Great news from my sponsor, Tom Shaw Realtors, proving if you want to buy, sell homes, farms, acreage, you want Tom Shaw. In 2025, selling more than 100 properties, $52 million in sales. ShawRealtors.com. When I have business clients or guests from out of town, I often take them to Cafe Napoli. I know they're going to enjoy any of the Napoli locations. Cafe Napoli in Clayton, Napoli 2 in Town and Country, Napoli 3 in St. Charles, next to Napoli C, Napoli Kirkwood, or Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta in the Chesterfield Valley. Excellent food and intellectual conversation, if they bring the intellectual conversation. And NapoliSTL.com. NapoliSTL.com. Renewal by Anderson asking, are you still battling cold drafts? Windows icing up again? Utility costs surging? You're worried about paying more every month? The truth is, you may already be paying for new windows and money lost to energy escaping your home. And here's the thing, you don't want to do this project twice. Renewal by Anderson spends every day replacing bad technology, poor installation of windows and doors that simply don't stand the test of time. But you can afford the best. America's most trusted window replacement company, Anderson. Call 877-WINDOWS or visit rbastl.com. Learn about our December savings event right now. 877-WINDOWS, rbastl.com. Renewal by Anderson. Superior products, exceptional service. 2026, a great time to visit Lit Cigar Lounge. The Lit Cigar Facebook has numerous events from tastings to music. My main reason for going to Lit is always quality cigars, premium whiskeys. Odds are we'll see each other at Lit Cigar Lounge. A few doors down, Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta. Get a pizza baked over coals. Excellent crust and flavor. Or choose one of the many great pasta dishes. You won't leave hungry. Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta and Lit Cigar Lounge in the Chesterfield Valley.
This is News Talk STL. This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Welcome to Coosa Steel. My name's Andrew Seville. I joined here in 2001 with my dad after I graduated from the University of Alabama. In October of 2025, we landed our first huge tire rack deal that we had in 10 years. This is going to keep our racks department busy for 2 shifts a day, 6 days a week, and we're pumping them out as fast as we can go, and they're all going to Shippensburg, Pennsylvania, right in America. Mr. President, what you've done for these guys down front, what you've done for our entire economy, what you've done for all of America, couldn't be done without your favorite word, tariffs. You did it. You're making America great again. You're making all of these guys more in their wages, and we couldn't be more than happy to call you Mr. President.
That is the Coosa Steel president, Andrew Seville. In case you didn't detect the accent, he's from Alabama, Georgia, whatever it was. But I love it. And he's talking again about how the Trump tariffs really reignited the steel industry. It comes too late for Granite City Steel, Altered Steel, let me correct that, because they were shutting down and laying off, and they don't think they're going to be able to maintain or continue at last report. But now with the Trump tariffs being declared illegal by the Supreme Court, what happens next? How will that be affecting steel industry and others going forward? Let me give you the background on the steel industry itself. Trump's Section 232 tariffs intensified to 50% last year, thereby boosting the U.S. steel industry by decreasing imports nearly a third, which meant increased domestic production. The very thing that the Coosa Steel exec was saying. increasing their domestic production, raising profits, strengthening domestic mills, adding jobs, increasing tariffs for steel using manufacturers using things like for auto and construction. Yes, there were some higher consumer prices that came out, but things are still moving forward. For the most part, many consider the tariffs a boon for the U.S. steel industry. More than $10 billion in new investments for the mills and a 3% rise in domestic production. It was meant to be a tide that would lift all boats, but as I said in the Granite City area, it has not been that strong enough. They were already deep underwater many times, and a lot of that goes back to during the Biden administration, didn't really help. But with less foreign competition, U.S. steel producers can gain more power and get better prices. So again, going on the plus side. Now with the Supreme Court ruling that all these tariffs are illegal, Trump's got to do something else. And he did sign an executive order saying, I'm going to put a 10% tariff on all countries. And of course, they will continue to argue to have others put in place and try to reset the stage once again. Democrats are loving this. Why would they love anything that would hurt our country? Because so many of them don't love our country. That's a sad, pathetic fact. They don't love our country. There's not one person on the left, I mean the truly on the left, that loves our country. There are many Democrats who do. I know some of them. They disagree with Trump, they don't like him, that's fine. But they still love this country. And if you sit them down, if you can educate them, if you can get them unindoctrinated from the pablum they've been fed by the progressives, they would recognize this cannot be good for our country. Just as simple as it cannot be good to have our children constantly indoctrinated. You might not be the sex you were born. You might need to have radical surgery, cut off your penis, cut off your breast, because you were born in the wrong gender. And you might have more shootings like we've had of transgenders going out and shooting, as we did the other day at the skating rink. There was one picture of this guy. He's in his 50s. He had his surgery decades ago, but he's still on. Once you do this, you got to stay on these puberty blockers. You got to stay on various other drugs. Everybody that works or has been around sports aware of the danger of steroids. And you'd see some players that were heavily into it suffering various mental illnesses in addition to physical illnesses, but it was called roid rage. They would just go crazy simply because they spilt their coffee a bit. I mean, over-the-top crazy. Roid rage. Their system so battling inside itself, they had no way to contain it. That's what happens to every one of these folks that undergo this transgender surgery. And this guy now at the age of 56 pulls out a pistol, kills his newly graduated son, the mother, and was trying to shoot and kill others. And there was one picture I saw posted of him posing in front of, I don't recall if it's a Camaro or a Corvette or whatever. This guy's a big muscular build. Looks like a man in every way, just looking at him. But he's got on a loose skirt, has his legs in heels, crossed together, posing as a model. His arms wrapped around, quote, his bosoms. His bosom, I should say. Posing as a woman would. That is a mental illness. It would be laughable except for the fact it leads to murder and violence against others. Don't expect the leftist media to tell you about it. One of their first questions now is, was the shooter transsexual? Yes. Oh, let's forget the story. Let's move on. We're trying to turn away from that, and I mean as a nation. And even Democrats who do not like Trump recognize That is wrong. That is wrong. But so many of them are fearing to speak out, fearing that the left woke crowd is still alive enough that it will come get them and destroy them. So they just stay silent, even knowing their children are probably being indoctrinated in schools at that point. And, of course, many on the left, they want the borders to be open. They want all the illegals that can come in to come in. They don't care about vetting them. Just let them in, as, thank you, Joe Biden did. Georgia Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones says Trump's America First policies are not only enhancing border security, but, again, helping jobs.
The reason why I've supported Donald J. Trump since 2016 through 2020 to 2024 is because he has done exactly what he said he's going to do for this country. When he said he's going to put America first, he did just that. He shut down the border. He's bringing jobs back to this country.
That's what we want. Even Democrats want a job. Well, if they have any self-esteem and self-worth. Or do they want to remain generationally on the teat of the government? Interior Secretary Burgum points out also all those who were against fossil fuels, you wanted to close all the coal plants, you wanted to shut them down, you wanted to go fully solar and wind power, and that would take care of everything. He said, look at what we just experienced.
Certainly, there's a reason why it's coming back, because America needs affordable, reliable, secure sources of energy. And you saw in the northeast part of the country a couple weeks ago when we had this cold spell that extended over a week, 25% of the power in New England was coming from coal. 2% came from wind and solar during that storm. This is just irreplaceable right now. The coal miners and the coal companies that are keeping the lights on in this country, keeping people warm, keeping people from freezing to death, they're getting it done, and they have put in unbelievable efforts to clean up their things. We've got the cleanest coal plants in the world right now.
25% of what was helping keep New England warm and with the lights on came from coal. So much for the environmentalists to say that it's going to kill us. Here's something else that'll kill you. Cold, freezing. Mondamis, New York, they had dozens of deaths in the streets, the homeless. And their attitude in New York is so bad, so sad. They're not really working to achieve anything other than push more socialist programs. And, of course, keep in mind the cost of health care, trying to keep that in check. Trump had worked out a deal with major drug companies, but the left wants you to believe that there's still nothing that you couldn't get through a coupon or through other outlets or maybe your own insurance. I don't know the specifics. Depends upon you, your insurance company or drug company or whoever you're dealing with. But the point is he got us to the most favored status where you're not going to pay any more than any other nation.
Under our most favored nation agreements, and this is the thing that I think every Republican should win on, even if you hate them in every other way. Agreements for drug prices, that we're slashing drug prices by 400, 500, even 600%. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. Because we were paying the highest drug prices in the world, and now we're paying whatever the lowest price is in the world. That's the price we're paying.
I just found out a drug that I'm on that I'm supposed to start taking is close to $120. Was. I can now get it for around $30. Same drug, not just a generic name, although that does apply, but because drug companies don't have the stranglehold they've had before. How about you? How many drugs do you need or your family need, and how much is it costing you? I've got a close relative who is type 1 diabetic. A lot of money being spent on those. Even with the cuts, still very expensive. You probably have some in your family along the line or friends. or heart medicines, things of that nature, or cancer meds that are not just keeping them alive, but making life worthwhile. Who wants to be against those? The leftists who just want you to suffer. They want you to suffer. And they don't care about the USA because they hate the USA. They should go to another planet because apparently there might be other solar systems out there that they could go to and be just fine. Or maybe not. Oh, that brings me, what a perfect segue, Larry. You're an amazing guy here. You really, I know I'm patting myself on the back, breaking my arm in the process. But it brings me to the point that Trump had announced yesterday, we're going to release all government files related to UFOs and aliens. Here's what he put on Truth Social. Based on the tremendous interest shown, I will be directing the Secretary of War and other relevant departments and agencies to begin the process of identifying, releasing government files related to alien and extraterrestrial life, unidentified aerial phenomena, the UAP, unidentified flying objects, UFOs, and any and all other information connected to these highly complex but extremely interesting and important matters. He made that announcement because Barack Obama was quoted for the other day saying, "Oh, I believe the aliens are real from what I've seen. I haven't seen one, but I believe they are." And boy, when that hit the fan, the Obama machine fan turned off until he got it all cleaned up so he could come out and say, "Well, I didn't say that I believe necessarily they exist." But he was suggesting there's a lot of information. And he indicated a lot of it might be underground. But he also said they're not being kept at Area 51. But he said, I believe they are real, but I haven't seen them. Then he had to walk back his comment saying, well, I saw no evidence while I was president. I'm just trying to stick with the spirit of the interview, but since it's gotten so much attention, let me clarify. Just statistically, the universe is so vast, the odds are good, there's life out there. What do you think? This week, because of Obama's remarks, I had my friend and the host of Coast to Coast AM, George Noory, on. His program often deals with the paranormal, UFOs, and others. And George is fully convinced that we have been visited by aliens from other solar systems. And he's had guests on that claim that they were picked up and taken to another system and then brought back to our system. Or at least they were inside a UFO for a period of time and then put back in their bed. Do you believe that? I don't have proof one way or the other. Do you? As always, thanks for listening. Enjoy your weekend. May God bless you and your family. We'll be back Monday with another program. And remember our pledge, one nation under God.